Welcome back to Media7, where I'm talking about Asperger's syndrome and autism in the media with North and South Joanna Wayne, Helen Baxter and Shortland Street storyliner Edwin McRae. If the Asperger story is only fitfully told in the news media, we live in an age where it's being aired everywhere in screen drama. Along with time travel and impenetrable plots, disability is big on network television. We've had the kid in a wheelchair, played by an able-bodied actor from a boy band. The controversial deaf choir, who mostly actually were. And the kid with cerebral palsy, who really is.
Are you sure you don't want to get the skinny jeans? Because those are really supposed to be in style now. The skaters wear them.
Do I look like a skater?
But the disability soup du jour is Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism characterised by extreme usefulness to screenwriters. There's The Big Bang Theory's Sheldon, a character whose every line is an Aspie in-joke.
Hey Penny, how was work?
Great. I hope I'm a waitress at the Cheesecake Factory for my whole life.
Was that sarcasm?
No.
Was that sarcasm?
Yes.
Was that sarcasm?
Stop it!
And the unworldly but brilliant Temperance Brennan in Bones. But their nature is only hinted at, if broadly. Shortland Street's writers created a more realistic character in the recently departed Gabrielle.
I dissected the muscles and drilled 2 holes in the foramen magnum, then cauterised the cerebellar tonsils so I could remove the base of the skull. The patient was in ICU for 3 days. Headaches and balance problems resolved fully within 2 weeks.
Your recall is very precise.
Yes, many people aren't at all precise.
The new NBC series Parenthood is setting up the trauma of an Asperger diagnosis as a central storyline.
She thinks that you may have Asperger's.
Asperger's? Like autism?
Please don't make me be alone with this. I don't want to.
Claire Danes' characterisation of autism celebrity Temple Grandin in the new HBO film of that name
My name is Temple Grandin. I'm not like other people.
really is like the real thing.
When does a nerd turn into, Asperger, which is just mild autism? I mean, Einstein and Mozart and Tesla would all be probably diagnosed as autistic spectrum today.
And even Bollywood is in on the act with My Name is Khan, a film about a young man from Mumbai whose nature leads him to being mistaken for a terrorist. So what's the impact of all this cultural cut-through? Does being this year's thing mean you're nowhere next year? Or has autism and disability arrived for good? Edwin, the Gabrielle Jacobs character, how did she come about? Was it, who said we should have an Asperger character and why?
Well, it was originally came from the producer at the time, Jason Daniel, and the need for a character who could come in and shake up our other characters, really, with their idiosyncrasies. And with a hospital, of course, we want the high-flying surgeons, we want the interesting characters, so we combined that idea with Gabrielle Jacobs and brought in a high-functioning surgeon with Asperger's in that case.
So that's the interesting thing, is that these characters of this nature actually have their uses in storytelling, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Gabrielle's a fascinating character, and I think that's the strength of her, is that she's immediately interesting. Now, whether you like her or not, on first glance, and many people did, take a while to work out who this character was and why she was acting as they thought strangely. But then, as people grew to know the character and understand her, then this wonderful, complex character kind of opened up for us with so many possibilities.
Did you ever consider having her played by someone who was on the autism spectrum? Because I know that's a big issue in drama at the moment, as able-bodied actors playing disabled people.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I guess at the end of the day, it's who's got the skills and the talent to portray the characters as effectively as they can. I was lucky to see some of the casting auditions, and Virginie she had it was a sincere quality that we were looking for. Other actors tended to perhaps overplay the character so that the character was only Asperger's and nothing else, whereas Verge brought a kind of calmness, sensitivity to the role that we were looking for.
Short and Street has done this a number of times before. I mean, you cast a young Downs girl at one point, which I thought was quite a bold move, and that worked too. Yeah,
absolutely. Again, it's how do we get the most sincere and convincing portrayal, and whether that be an actor who can perform the role really well, whether that be somebody who's actually struggling with that situation themselves, it's really who's going to give the best performance.
Helen, what do you make of this sudden rash of characters on TV? Do you feel cheered by it?
Oh, completely, especially seeing female characters, because, you know, we're a minority in a minority. You know, there's some statistics say 1 in 5 ratio, 1 to 10 ratio. So, you know, characters like yours and Bones, who I love, it's just great. And you know, there was also a couple of years ago in America's Next Top Model, Heather Kuzmich, who's a games designer, who's gorgeous, and she did so well. And I cheered her on. I was really happy to watch her progress on
And she was absolutely out, wasn't she?
Yeah, completely. And that was fantastic to see. So yeah, I'm all for it. More, I'd want to see more of it.
Do you have role models?
Not until recently. I mean, that's the difficulty when you're a quirky kind of lass. The people you kind of gravitate to are other quirky types. So yeah, I think, you know, definitely Bones. I mean, I potentially could have gone down that route because I've always been fascinated by medical science. But yeah, I'd like to see a lot more, you know, of all types of neuro brain wirings, because it's just important to see yourself reflected in the popular culture of the day.
Do you think that there's a risk of portraying everyone on the autism spectrum as a savant?
Definitely. And
not everyone is a maths genius.
Absolutely.
People just want to be happy, don't they?
Yeah, completely. And I think that's a difficulty. You know, people find out that you're on the spectrum, like, oh, what are you brilliant at? I don't know. Certainly not maths in my case. But yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, there's a saying that once you've met one Aspie, you've met one Aspie. Yeah. So.
And that came through quite clearly in your story, wasn't it? I quite like the way you described it, some traits being louder than others. There is no typical Asperger, despite the fact that there is a diagnosis.
And some are so on the borderline that people wouldn't notice. They might just think they're a bit quirky or a bit eccentric, and other kids really struggle with it hugely. And everybody's slightly different. We talk about the story came from, you know, a bit disruptive, badly behaved kids, but often they're the quiet kids who sit at the back and, you know, just withdraw. So there's a huge variety, and some do have, Matthew, the boy in my story, he was delightful, really smart, really engaging, beautiful looking, but had real struggles, and his parents are probably homeschooling him for the rest of his life. But other kids are just, you know, really super average kids who are just trying to make an everyday life and get through as best they can.
Yeah, and it was actually, as you said earlier, that you seeing all these representations in the culture that got you started on the story. Are we at the stage where any of the kids that you looked at actually think it's cool to be who they are?
Yeah, Matthew, who I interviewed, his parents who describe themselves an Aspie family, they're both really high functioning in that computer IT sort of field. And he said, yeah, I'm an Aspie. They're a great Aspie scientist, so I'm going to be an Aspie scientist. And he understood why he behaves the way he does. And yeah, he thought it was okay with it. Some of it's tough. He talked about being lonely and the way that other kids sometimes react to him. He talked about banging his head on the middle post at school. You know, we're not just talking about kids who just don't fit in a little bit. It's some quite extreme exclusion. Kids think they're freaks.
And to some extent that happens because the schools, there is no funding. The schools don't have the support. Do you think that's the next story that needs to be written about this? Because if you talk to parents, that's all you hear.
Yeah, I think some of the people I spoke to said the changes don't have to be massive. It's just making small allowances and making the classroom work in a way that can actually, all the kids can benefit from it. So I think other parents, one parent went to a smaller school thinking it would be a supportive environment, and it was disastrous. One of the mothers came and obviously speaking on behalf of other parents and said, have you thought of moving on? We don't want our school to be a special needs school. So I think some people...
I know of other schools that have said that.
Yeah, and I think parents get resentful because they think all the resources are going to go into this kid who's soaking up the teacher's time. And I think teachers feel that pressure too. But actually it sounds like there are quite small little adjustments and accommodations that can be made that really once you learn the tricks, they're not that hard to do.
Well, there's always the people concentrate very much on the social issues, but there's a huge amount of sensory processing issues which actually can cause more difficulties day to day. You know, I have super sensitive hearing, smell, fluorescent lights make me feel nauseous. I can't go into large supermarkets without shades and a peak cap on. And you get bombarded with sensory overload, and that's, you know, that actually is harder to deal with day to day than the eye contact or dealing with people sometimes. So smaller changes in the classroom to do with the environment can have such a massive effect.
Yeah, I wonder, we're talking about also older kids here, adolescents, because it often seems that it's much easier to sell something like this if it's about 5-year-olds. You saw that with the Australian election. You know, they went into a bidding war on autism support services. It was all for 5- and 6-year-olds. Nothing for 17-year-olds who maybe have greater needs.
And your teens are such a hard time anyway without having to deal with being on the spectrum.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope people have learned a bit, and well done, all of you. That is the end of this discussion. Thank you to Joanna Wayne, Helen Baxter and Edwin McRae. If you'd like to know more about Asperger's and autism, we've provided some useful information in the Media7 blog. If you or your family are making your way through this difficult ground, keep going. You're not alone. We'll be back with Media7 next week. Until then, goodbye.